Hey gals and guys, me Devil here, and welcome back to yet another episode of Cursage Gaming. This time, we're going to be reading a Team Fortress 2 creepypasta titled The Spy. So let's see what The Spy has to offer us. So the story starts out with the no-name player telling the reader that we all should be afraid of the spy from the hit video game series that is riddled with bots, Team Fortress 2. One day, on the 27th of October back in 2012, the player was looking forward to hanging out with his or her friends on Halloween night to watch some movies. One of the movies in question being El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie. The player was at home playing his or her favorite game ever, Overwatch. Team Fortress 2. And tells us that his or her favorite class was the spy. He or she loved the spy so much that he or she has the character's exact outfit in real life. He or she even wears the drip to anime conventions and local game conventions all the time. He or she even learned how to use the butterfly knife. He or she is truly the weebiest of all the spy mains. During that day, the Halloween event was going on, so he or she was trying to get all the special goodies that were only available in that event. The player was playing as the sniper and tried killing Marasmus with the huntsman bow. Everything seemed fine until the player got killed by an enemy spy with no cosmetics or special weapons. The spy's name in the kill feed was just Spy. Also, every time he or she was killed by the spy, he had an evil smile on his face, according to the player. The player thought he or she was just killed by a new player and just shrugged it off. The player once again got ovulated by the same spy and realized that the spy was playing really smart and that there was no way that the spy was new at the game. The player tried to get revenge by playing as the spy as well, but got murked by that same player, yet again. Only this time, the person was the medic. The player said that that guy was good, maybe even pretty good. The player then decided to check the scoreboard, but was surprised to see Spy was nowhere on the board. The player thought the person left the game, but was immediately backstabbed by the spy. To add more salt to the wound, the spy, in game chat, typed, "Crikey! You an amateur and a fool!" Agitated by this, the player rage quitted. After committing low tier god, the player decided to go join a non-Halloween server. Playing some Badwater, the player decided to go as Spy since this map was one of his or her favorite maps to play as Spy. To the player's surprise, he or she got ratioed by the spy, but only this time, the spy's suit was darker, danker, and aged, and his face was pale. The player tried finding the spy on the scoreboard, but got no results. The player kept getting mollywopped by the spy to the point of domination. The spy left another message in chat. "I'm going to cut you like a Cornish game hen." The player was a little disturbed by this and decided to ask the other player if they are seeing this spy character. Everyone said no, and that they only saw the player killing his or herself over and over again. The player felt his or her grip on his or her sanity slowly loosen up upon seeing this revelation. Before the player could call up a mental institution, the spy sent another message in chat. "May I make a suggestion? Run." Hit and run, to be specific. Hit and run as in the 4th episode of the 6th season of the boner-fueling series Better Call Saul titled Hit and Run. The player's game froze and disconnected from the server. Creeped out by this, the player decided to join another server. The player was playing some Upward as the soldier and played very cautiously just in case the spy would be lurking around the corner hiding. The player saw the spy, but then turned invisible and disappeared. Kinda like how all the women do whenever they see Ethan Zobri or YT. The player thought it was quite odd that he or she didn't get backstabbed. The same thing happened again later, and it kept happening over and over. The player thought that the spy was just toying with the player and gave up pursuing the spy. Hours later, the player saw the spy once more and was trick stabbed. Because trick stabbing is totally what it's called when you exploit the game's dogshit hitboxes. Upon seeing the spy, he or she saw that he looked like a zombie. The spy's suit was torn and ragged and had dried blood on it. The spy's body was just a skeleton at this point. The player thought that the person was just using the Halloween cosmetics, but was still scared by this ACOG sight. What is wrong with me? The player left the server and decided to check his or her recent players list. The player found the spy and decided to check out the person's page. The profile picture was just an image of the spy grinning with red, demonic eyes. What the player found shook the player to his or her very core. The spy had no location, headline, player introduction, executive producer credit, or even the AMC watermark. He or she checked how many hours the person has on the game and was astonished that the spy had 44,204 hours logged into the game. The player checked the spy's stats and saw that he only played as the spy, had over 1 million points, and had 44,204 hours as his longest life, which meant that the spy never died. The player did some extensive math and scientific research and found out that the spy was playing the game since October 10, 2007, which was the day Team Fortress 2 was released. The player went back to the profile page and saw that the headline changed. It was changed to, "I see you, bitch." The player freaked the fuck out when he or she saw this. Then all of a sudden, a loud siren-like noise came from his or her speakers, which resulted in a blue screen. Kind of like how the Gene Timeline episode's intros looked in Better Call Saul. The player rebooted his or her PC and was surprised to see that his or her desktop was completely empty. It didn't even have a wallpaper, just a black background. Every time the player would do anything, the small faint sound of static could be heard. The player thought he or she had a virus due to probably downloading a fake Steam. What? And scanned his or her computer. The player booted up Steam in hopes to report the spy. The player clicked on the spy's name but got a 404 error saying the page doesn't exist. The player kept refreshing but got the same result. The player closed and decided to check the virus scan. When he or she did that, every program the player opened crashed and the static became really loud. The non-existent desktop wallpapers changed to the grinning, demonic, red-eyed spy. Except that the spy was a decayed corpse. According to the player, it looked like the right side of the spy's face was blown out by a gold camo double-barrel Olympia shotgun fitted with the Dragonfire attachment and FMJ. While the player stared at the spy's demonic red eyes, the spy spoke through the speaker screaming, "I'm coming for you!" The spy then started laughing like how Gene Takovic did in the series finale of the erection-inducing series Better Call Saul titled Saul Gone. The laughing kept getting increasingly louder and louder and more distorted and twisted. It was so loud that it started creating an echo in his or her room. The player's eardrums were getting ruptured and pulled out the power cable in desperation, which shut off his or her computer instantaneously. The player's computer was so broken that it needed reformatting, which took hours. The player told his or her friends that his or her computer just crashed and needed resetting. He or she didn't tell his or her friends about what happened that night. The player is currently re-downloading TF2 and is telling us that he or she is still scared of the spy and is still having nightmares to this day. The nightmares are about the spy stabbing the player, laughing as he looked into the player's eyes with those red demonic eyes. Every time the player would wake up, he or she woke up sweating with his or her butterfly knife right next to him or her. What a fucking weeb. Well, this was a pretty good creepypasta, and for the first TF2 one that we did, I'd say it was pretty decent. There are cliches though, don't get me wrong, but if you ignore them, it still makes for a very good creepypasta. One thing I really enjoyed was the build-up. The way the spy gradually got more and more unhinged gaming was done really well. The way the spy gradually got more and more unhinged gaming was done really well done. Also, the spy's degradation in appearance was done masterfully and should really be appreciated by every creepypasta enthusiast. Another really good thing was the way the player was written. The protagonist of the story was written really well and felt human. The actions the player took and the thoughts the player had felt really realistic and relatable. I mean, wouldn't you be scared if you saw a Frenchman smiling saying he'll shove a baguette up your rectum? Yeah, I thought so. Speaking of the Frenchman, the spy in this story was really frightening and was used very sparingly so that it wouldn't wear out its welcome. The description of the red demonic eyes and scary grin was so well done that I easily envisioned it in my mind and painted terrible images in my head. The desktop corruption was pretty creepy too, because of the fact that such a terrifying and visceral image was shown on the player's desktop. If that happened to me, I would have most definitely shat my pants, like how Zobrier does when he or she eats red meat, or when Ultrade plays a horror game. One thing that did bother me was the player's wallpaper. It was just a black screen. That is highly unrealistic, because I don't think anyone would have just a black wallpaper, because that is highly offensive. Judging from this, I can safely assume the author is a racist, because he or she views black people as just props used for wallpaper. That is highly offensive not only to me as a white man who uses Twitter on a daily basis, but also to Ethan Zobrier, since he or she is a black man. For those of you who forgot how Machinima director Ethan Girtha Mead Zobrier YT looked, he or she looked like this. Now, despite the cliches and extreme racism, this was still a really good gaming creepypasta, and I suggest you gals and guys give it a read. I'd rate this 4.5 refined metals out of 5 Saxy Awards. What would you gals and guys rate this? Comment down below. This has been another episode of Cursage Gaming, and if you like what you saw, make sure you like, comment, and taunt kill that subscribe button, and hit that bell icon for post notifications. Dislike it if you dislike it. This is me, Skeledevil, and I'm out.